looked at chapter 29 and 30, and the questions are in lesson 10, covering that material. Question 1, lesson 10 says, why were the Philistine lords afraid for David to go with them in battle against Saul? He wasn't really going to be loyal to them. He may become their adversary. May regain favor with the king by cutting off their heads. Question 2 says, how had David conducted himself toward Achash? I got an answer on that one.
Upright, doing the things that he should do.
Well, that's what Achash thought anyway. He hadn't really, but he'd actually gone out and raided the enemies of Judah. But he told the king he was raiding Judah. So he thought that he had been faithful. He believed that, pleasing to him. But David had been lying to him. Says, what results might have come to David had he assisted Achash in battle? What do you think might have happened if he went up and fought against Saul?
He would have been alienated from the Israelite people. A bad situation, I guess.
He could have lost him the kingdom in the end. He would have gone up and fought. But through God's providence, he got out of that. It says, question 4, it says, what occurred at Ziklag while David was with the Philistine army? Well, what happened there in the city after when David got back? What did he find there?
Oh, the Amalekites.
Yeah, they had attacked the city and burned it, carried away all of their families and women and children captive. What reaction did this provoke from David's men? What part? They were embittered and so embittered they even talked. Some of them talked of stoning David. How did David handle this problem? He strengthened himself in the Lord, which is the exact way he should have reacted. So, you see some low points for David, but he always comes back to his source of strength in the end. And that's what he does here. From whom did David inquire before going to battle?
The Lord.
He inquired of the Lord. Who did he use to do that? Do you remember who he called? Abiathar, the high priest. He had the ephod, and so he used Urim and Thummim to ask the Lord questions, and found out that the Lord was going to help him overtake these men and regain his people. Question 8 says, how did David learn who had attacked Ziklag?
They found the Egyptian.
They had an abandoned Egyptian slave that had been left for dead, sick in the desert, and he was able to inform them about their camping site. And says, what were the Amalekites doing when David attacked? Eating and drinking and dancing. They were celebrating too early here before they got away. Question 10 says, what law did David make regarding the distribution of food? Everyone should share equally. Those that went down to the battle and those that stayed with the baggage. 11, it says, to whom did David send shares of booty? Remember? The elders of Judah and all those different towns where he had found shelter and went about when he was staying away from Saul. So So he sent a gift to all of them from among the people. So that brings us to chapter 31, which is Saul's last battle and the death of Saul. And so here again, sort of the map of where the battle takes place up in northern Israel in the valley of Jezreel that runs through that area. It's a flat area that kind of breaks through the mountains, the central mountains in that area. It runs all the way down to the Jordan River. And Mount Gilboa is where Saul is going to be killed. And David's down here dealing with his situation at Ziklag and chasing the Amalekites while all this is going on. So meanwhile, back up at the battle in chapter 31, here you can see on this map kind of the topography there of the area. You have this central valley that's, there's a valley that runs from the sea, kind of goes all the way across Israel like this. You can see mountains in the center on either side, but there's a valley there where the battle takes place. And then they end up, Saul and his men flee up on Mount Gilboa, and that's where their bodies will be, where they'll be killed and their bodies will lay. And this map that shows where the camps are, camp of the Philistines and the camp of Saul, and then you see the city there next to the Jordan River. So up from the Jordan River, Bashan is where the bodies of Saul and his sons are going to be nailed to the wall of the city after the battle's over. And then the men at Jabesh Gilead, they're on the other side of the Jordan. You remember that's the city where Saul, when he first became king, went and rescued those people that the Ammonite ruler came up and said he was going to gouge out their right eye and cut off their right hands. Even if they surrendered, he was going to do that. But word was sent out to Saul and Israel, and they came and rescued those people. So there are going to be men from that city going to take down his body off the wall, so they don't ever forget that favor. How he started, how he helped them, he saved all of them. So we're kind of come full circle that the people from that city are the ones that take his body down. So that just shows you where these places are as we're talking about them. Verses 1 through 6, it says, now the Philistines were fighting against Israel. The men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. So the battle probably started off in the valley. They went poorly for Israel, and they flee up on Mount Gilboa where the soldiers are killed, and Saul and his sons are going to be killed. It says, and the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. So here's the end of Saul and his oldest sons. And the battle went heavily against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Saul is wounded. He's unable to flee, to get away from the enemy. So he's in a very difficult place since he's not dead, but he's wounded. And they're drawing close to him, pressing him heavily. And then we read about his final end that comes to him. Then Saul said to his armor bearer, draw your sword and pierce me through with it. Otherwise, these uncircumcised will come and pierce me through and make sport of me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. So Saul took his sword and fell on it. So you have the picture there of just how desperate Saul was at the end. And he's afraid he's certainly going to fall into the hands of the enemy, that they will have a practice like we read about the Japanese and different ones in history that take those that are wounded and torture them. You know, I guess settlers in the plains, the Indians, that kind of thing went on. They'd be tortured to death if they were found alive. So he wanted the armor bearer to kill the king, but Man is afraid to raise his sword against the Lord's anointed and take his life. And of course, we're only supposed to kill those that are God authorizes for us to kill, that are guilty of a crime, that have been rightly judged, or in time of battle against an enemy. But here he's ordered to kill him, and he's afraid to kill him. He won't do it. And Saul takes, could be the armor bearer's sword, and falls upon him. And he took the sword from him that he asked him to use, and fell upon the sword and killed himself. And try to bear in mind, this is the divine inspired account of what happened, right? We're going to hear another story in chapter 1 of 2 Samuel that an Amalekite tells, but it's not the same story about how Saul died. He tells it in order to get a reward for himself. So here's the real story. This is how Saul died. It's being told by the writer of the book, and he's inspired by the Holy Spirit. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. He takes his own life too. And Saul died with his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and all his men on that day. So you have then not only Saul, but also his armor bearer commit suicide, kill themselves, lest they be captured. Here's what the writer of the book of Chronicles has to say. Book of First Chronicles doesn't tell any of the events up to where we're at right now. So if you're reading First Chronicles, you have really first and second. You can really read from the book of Judges and read all the way through Second Kings, and it's all in chronological order, and it's all one long story without interruption. Then you get to First Chronicles. It gives the genealogy and the background of the families of all of these people. That's very helpful. And then it tells about the death of Saul, and then the reign of David is the rest of First Chronicles. So First Chronicles and Second Samuel are parallel with each other. You can go back and forth and compare them like you do the Gospels and understand details about the story. So Second Chronicles, it does tell about the death of Saul. And it says, so Saul died for his trespass, which he committed against the Lord, because of the word of the Lord, which he did not keep, and also because he asked counsel of a medium, making inquiry of it, and did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore, he killed him and turned the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. So we have an inspired statement that this happened by the will of God, and it happened for sins that Saul had committed is why he died in this way and lost this battle. And it was because he did not keep the commandment of the Lord to destroy the Amalekites, and to destroy their king, and to put all of the booty and everything under a man. And but he brought back the best of it. He violated that. He lost his kingdom. And then on top of not following the counsel of the Lord, he also went and inquired of a medium to talk to the dead. That's forbidden under the law of Moses. And, you're supposed to inquire by God's word is how we're to find out about what God wants us to do or what we need to know. We don't go to mediums or astrologers or any of these that practice the occult in order to try to inquire. He said he did not inquire of the Lord. Well, we know he made a half-hearted effort to ask the Lord's will, but obviously from what the Chronicle writer says, he didn't do it with a whole heart and sincerely, persistently like he should have. So he says he didn't inquire of the Lord. I guess maybe sometimes when people just offer up a half-hearted prayer and then they go on and do whatever they want, they didn't really inquire of God, did they? You've got to really put your heart into finding out what God's will is. And so he said he didn't inquire of the Lord. So God turns the kingdom over to the son of Jesse. Then in the last part of the chapter, we're told about what happened to the bodies then on the battlefield and the consequences of losing this battle. And when the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley with those who were beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled, and then the Philistines came and lived in them. So the rest of the valley there is taken over. The people are so panicked when they see the army defeated and the king killed and the sons killed that they just pack up and leave. I saw I know a show about World War II just the other night. Everybody was fleeing out of, from the Nazis and trying to get away. Roads were just filled with people and all their possessions trying to get away from the Nazis and leaving out of Paris and other cities. And sort of the same picture here. They just pack up whatever they can grab and leave. And Philistines don't have any resistance. They can just come in and settle in their cities. Even some of the cities on the other side of Jordan, it says the people were fleeing out of. So they just cut Israel in two when they come across that valley. We're falling into a very sad state of affairs in the kingdom of God. It says, and it came about on the next day that the Philistines came to strip the slain, and that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head and stripped off his weapons and sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. So they treat Saul like David treated Goliath, right? He cut Goliath's head off and had it as a trophy. That was a practice, I guess, that they were engaged in those ancient times. And they do the same thing to Saul and his sons. They behead them and use their heads as trophies to send throughout the land to announce their great victory and that their idols have given to them. So they make this not only a military victory, but a spiritual victory of their gods over Jehovah, the way that they give credit to the idols for this victory. Of course, we know the real reason, because God was punishing the house of Saul. It didn't have anything to do with those idols that Saul lost the battle. It says they put his weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth-Shan. So they put these in there like they did the Ark of the Covenant. They put in Dagon's temple. Here the Ashtaroth, the female goddess, they put Saul's armor in there as a trophy and an offering in honor to this goddess. We're told in the book of Chronicles that they took his head, they took his head and put it in Dagon's temple. So they mentioned, one of them mentions one temple, one of them mentions the other. So they're celebrating these great victories over the people. How humiliating. It says, now when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and walked all night and took the body of Saul and the body of his sons from the wall of Beth-Shan. And they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So Saul has some people that appreciate him. Even in death here, they hear about the shame that's happened to him and to the bodies of he and his sons, how they're out there exposed on the wall, and they make an all-night march in the dark, risk their lives to take their bodies down and take them to a place where they can't be desecrated anymore, burn off what is left, I guess, of the putrefied flesh, and then gather up the bones and give them an honorable burial underneath the tree that's there in the city. And you see how sincerely they were sorry that Saul had died, the one that had delivered them from such a terrible fate, and that they mourned over him for 7 days with fasting. So there's some that don't forget the good deeds that are done to them. Whatever else Saul did later, they never forgot his good beginning and what he did for them. So there's something to be said for gratitude and making some loyal friends in your life that will look after you when times are the worst. So, any other thoughts on 1 Samuel? Again, the book is divided because the scroll is too big, basically, to put in one book. They have 2 scrolls, it's all one book, 1 and 2 Samuel. But you move on then to 2 Samuel. And 2 Samuel is going to deal with the reign of David. That's what it's about, his kingship. And we have more information in the Bible about David than any other Old Testament character. The whole book just on his reign And half of this book has been about before he became king. So you can see, and then you have the book of First Chronicles. It's going to be about that.
Is this the only place in the Bible for, like I said, cremation, I guess, or the burning of the body? I don't know of any other place. There's a place usually they bury.
I did read some about that that's not their usual burial practice, so it's sort of an unusual circumstance because of the way his body had been treated, I guess. It had already putrefied and everything. They did have a practice after the bodies have decayed that they get, we know in New Testament times that if they found bone boxes over there in Israel that are full of people's bones after they decayed, and they gather their bones up. So this would hasten that, burning the flesh off. I don't think it was a regular cremation, wasn't a regular way they dealt with bodies. So let's look at some lessons here, and there are quite a few things to think about in these two this full account that's given here in chapter 31. So first of all, the word of the Lord is sure. Everything that happened here is exactly what God said was going to happen. He said it when Samuel was alive. He said it after Samuel spoke from the dead. What was going to happen? He would die. His 3 sons would die. That next day they'd be with Samuel among the dead. And that will all happen. And you can see how God's judgments can be carried out upon the wicked without, some supernatural miracle where the laws of nature are violated in order for Saul to meet his end. But God, with an unseen hand, controls the laws of nature and works among the nations of men. He still does today, and can manipulate things to come out just like he wants them to come out. And that's the reason we can pray and expect answers to our prayers, that God, through providence, can bring about good, or he can bring about judgment. And he does judge people in this world sometimes through his providential guidance of history. And here through the events, Saul reaches his punishment. David's brought to the throne, just like God wanted it to happen. So we can see God's control and his outworking of events and carrying out righteous judgments against the enemies of God's people in the way that he wants, or God himself and his enemies. And so don't be surprised sometimes when, evil nations and persecute Christians, they fall, or evil men come to a terrible end because they were opposed to the gospel, and it happens still. He still strikes people down in just the same way as he did Saul. Being, self-willed is certainly a great mistake, because what you're doing is sinning against yourself, and that's what Saul did. Look at the terrible and humiliating end that he came to. But he who sins against me injures himself. All those who hate me love death. If you hate the wisdom of God and you're self-willed, you hate yourself. And it's not going to go well for you to have God on the other side. And look what happened to Saul. It's a fearful thing, the Hebrew writer said, to fall into the hands of the living God. And all of us ought to be afraid of that, and not fall away from the Lord or be unfaithful, or crucify afresh the Lord again by forsaking him. You don't want to fall into the hands of God, because he knows how to punish. And here's just a small example with Saul of what can happen. And the retribution is surely going to overtake the impenitent transgressor. I'm going to read a couple of other passages. Well, Proverbs 29:1. Somebody want to grab that. Larry, can you get that? Tells us what happens when you're like Saul and you're stubborn and you won't change. And you wouldn't really repent.
A man who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond repair.
Sort of fits it in that there.
I have a question. What is the transition period from the time Saul was honored by God to become king until the time of this retribution? And was it possible for him to have, with humility, changed his way, because he was visited by David, and he knew to be a man of God several times? So, what was it? Well, he did have time to make a deed.
Well, his total reign was 40 years, we know that. And I don't know for sure how long it was between the beginning of his reign and the time that he committed the sin by not, punishing the Amalekites. I mean, we don't know, we don't have a way to calculate exactly how many years that was. But we know that David was, I have a chronology of David's life, a possible one. Sometime around the time he was 18, 19 is when the battle with Goliath and those things happened. And David becomes king. He's 30 years old when this happens. So that's 11 years at least. At least it's been 11 years since the kingdom was taken away from him, because it happened even before that. So maybe 20 years.
So he had time.
He had opportunity to change and repent and save his soul, certainly. And maybe he couldn't change God's mind on his family losing the kingdom, but he could have at least walked humbly to God. That was right. I mean, there's some things, like Esau. He wept and wanted to change, getting the inheritance, but there was no repentance found for that. It was going to go to Jacob. It wasn't going to go to him. Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't save his soul. He couldn't go on to live a good life. Sometimes you make decisions that affect the rest of your life. But he wouldn't have died this, criminal trying to kill David all the time. But he was. He didn't have to do any of that.
Well, I guess the point of my question was, God gave him plenty of opportunities. He was merciful. David encountered him face to face more than once.
And he had even confessed his sin more than once, that he was wrong. But he'd go right back to it. And the proverb said, the man that stiffens his neck, and that, of course, we think about a mule or something, you're trying to get it to turn and you beat it or whatever, and it just stubbornly won't do what you want. And that's the way Saul was. God, no matter what God did or what happened, he would not change his attitude. He's going to hang on to the kingdom and get rid of David. So the wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. And here Saul gets the physical punishment of death, certainly. The sins of parents often cut off opportunity from their children. Think of what Jonathan could have had. He could have been the next king, but his father's a sinner and won't repent and fought God, and as a result, look what happened to Jonathan. Jonathan got killed too. And Jonathan was a righteous, good man. So sometimes your parents can, through their choices, they can ruin your opportunities. And of course, what can we learn about that as parents? We don't want to cut off the hope and opportunities that our children might have to serve God by doing foolish things that would ruin our family's reputation or set a bad example for them or get them pointed in the wrong direction. So we have a lot to do with what happens to our children financially and spiritually and all different kinds of ways, the decisions that we make. So the innocent often suffer along with the guilty. Jonathan was an innocent man, but he died there in that battle just like Saul did. Because he was closely associated with his father and tried to help his father. He got killed along with the other soldiers. They were also caught up in this destruction. And so God, first of all, anytime suffering happens or something bad happens, even to a righteous person, remember God's in charge of everybody's life, and we're all under a death sentence, aren't we? It's been determined from the beginning, we're all going to die. So God can decide when to die, right? It's up to him. So that's the first thing to always bear in mind. Say, well, this is really bad. Jonathan died, and got killed along with it. It's part of living in this world, and it's part of, he died a little sooner maybe than he would have otherwise, but we're all going to die if the Lord doesn't come first. And he's tied men together in close relationships. We're very intimate with other people. And when other people do evil things and make bad decisions, it comes back on all of us. And somebody especially close in your family, that's going to affect you. And it can affect you badly even though you're doing what's right. So that's part of living in the world that we live in among men, is that sometimes we suffer even though we're righteous because of what other people are doing. their decisions that they make. Somebody decides to drive a truck, get on the wrong side of the freeway when you're driving down, they might kill you even though you're innocent. You never did anything to deserve it or whatever. You live in this world with people that make bad decisions. And it talks here certainly the godly often suffer because of that connection. The suffering and death of the righteous often has a beneficial purpose. As we pointed out, Jonathan's death certainly shows just how severe the punishment of God was for the house of Saul because of this sin that he committed against God. And it affected his whole family, all of his offspring, but even the righteous and the good, both suffered because of what their father did. And it's brought David to the throne. It served a purpose. What if Jonathan had been alive? There would have been a big dispute about who should be king, right? There's not going to be a dispute now because the house of Saul is wiped out. So David's going to have a clear path to be the king now that's going to take his place. And he gets called a little earlier to paradise. And that's something to think about. I've heard a number of stories in my life as a Christian. Some excellent young person in the church. And maybe they're out doing some good thing on the side of the highway to help somebody and they get killed. I know the people that's happened to in Houston. Well, that's terrible, and we're sorry that they were lost to their family and sorry that we don't get to know them. But for their soul and for their circumstances, they went straight to paradise, right? Whatever other problems they were ever going to have in life or whatever, they skipped all that. And when you get there, you don't care about this world and what you missed out on. Whether you were married or you weren't married or whatever, it's not going to matter. You're going to be in a better place and celebrating something that's a whole lot better. So you say that person got to start their vacation a little early. We wouldn't be feeling bad for them. So what about Jonathan? He went to be with Samuel and the other righteous dead. He's in a good spot. And he avoided whatever evils are left in this life. The sin of suicide is something certainly that comes up in this chapter. You got the Saul and the armor bearer killed themselves. There's 4 cases of suicide in the Bible. Ahithophel is going to commit suicide in the next book, and then you got Judas, right? So that's 4. And what does the Bible say? What would you say about somebody? Well, I don't want to live. I'm just going to kill myself. It might go hard for me, so I'm going to just take my life. What would be some arguments against that? Well, some of the things in Scripture, certainly God fills into all of us, most every animal. This idea of self-preservation, right? Sort of a law of nature, and that's God's law, that you shouldn't kill yourself. And you're certainly been given a trust that you've been given life to live. And God's the commander. And one writer I was reading was Cicero made the statement that he should not kill himself because the commander had to give him permission to, which is God. All right? God's in charge of my life. If he doesn't give me permission to kill myself, then I don't have the right to do so. Life is a gift. Cowardice before real and imagined evils. That's what got to Saul here. And to his armor bearer, maybe. They committed suicide. Think about all the Christians that went through horrible things and they didn't commit suicide. They faced those things, if that was God's will. Prohibited by the law of God, don't we have a commandment, thou shalt not kill, or you shall not murder? But would that apply to yourself too? Don't take innocent life. It's only the guilty that their life is to be taken according to God's law, and they've been justly convicted. Do you take their life? Or in war. But this is not a justifiable way to take your life. You think about the New Testament exhortations about to endure with patience whatever trial or suffering or whatever it is we face. Isn't it telling us don't kill yourself? You endure with patience whatever it is to the end. You have the example of how many good men. Job didn't kill himself, did he? He had it about as bad as you could have it. He hung in there, right? He did not give up his integrity all the way to the end. And God blessed him. And he's an example of us of patience, even in all those afflictions and disease that he had. So we have all of these men of holy courage that had heavy afflictions, in the Bible, and they hung in there. They didn't kill themselves. And then, of course, we have things that help us to not have that frame of mind. We ought to have faith in God's providence. He'll cause all things that happen to work together for the good of our soul. If we'll hang in there and love Him to the end, it'll help us. And we have confidence in His wisdom, power, and all the promises He's given us. There's an evil example there of Saul. Look what it led to. As soon as the armor bearer saw what Saul had done, he did the same thing. Position like Saul. They particularly have a powerful influence on other people. And it should be used for good, but here it's used for bad. And we should be aware of that. The consequences of choosing an earthly king, that's what a lot of this book was about. They chose a king. Yes, Andrew.
I was going to add to that, that not only are our bodies God's the temple of God, and He owns us. We don't have control over ourselves, but so we shouldn't defame ourselves or whatever. But also in the book of James, we learn over and over again that our trials and tribulations are to be counted as joy, and that's what is developing our character and making us into a better person so that we can help others. So the things we go through in life here are only to better develop us and make us better Christians. So we shouldn't look at those things as negative. We should have this joy.
They called you to long for those spiritual things that last versus these earthly temporary things that are painful and don't last. They kind of wean us, sufferings wean you away from the world. That's the things they do. You don't want to stay here. You want to go be with God. They chose an earthly king, and look what happened. They got a king after their own heart instead of God's heart. And they lost all those soldiers. They lost Saul. They lost the king. They lost their cities. Didn't turn out too good, did it? So, I mean, if you were looking back at this, you'd say that was a very poor choice. When Samuel told them, don't do this, but they did it anyway. And the enemies are triumphant. But in the midst of this, something good can still come out of it in their humiliation. God's still there, isn't He? The real invisible king, that is the king of Israel, that they should have been looking to all along. He's still the king. They can still turn to God. He can still bring everything back. And He's going to bring David to the throne. So they need to look to God. And that's where they should be looking. And they have an opportunity to see God here. And then you have that great example of faithful friends from those men going to take down Saul's body. Don't you wish you could do many, many deeds that are good for people? Have many, many friends that would want to look after you. Saul, to think how many more friends he could have made if he'd stayed faithful. The background here at 2 Samuel, just a little bit of a survey of where we're headed. The second book of Samuel, it picks up the story again right where we left off. Matter of fact, it's still talking about the aftermath of, Saul's death when you get to chapter 1. And so the purpose of 2 Samuel is to record some highlights from David's reign that the Holy Spirit has chosen to give to us. Events recorded are chosen by Him for His purpose. We also have that we are going to compare as we go along. 1 Chronicles chapter 11 through 29 are about the reign of David. So there's a parallel account of these things with other things added by the writer of Chronicles. The writer of Chronicles especially tells you extra things about the temple, about the priesthood, about the things connected with, the worship of God at the temple and so on. So there'll be a lot of extra material on those kind of things. And then there are many Psalms that are written in the life of David that we can refer to. There's 58 New Testament references to David that we can also look to. We know his reign is 40 years. The prominent theme is David becomes king in chapter 2 and verse 4. He captures Jerusalem to be his capital city. It lies right in between what will be Israel and Judah in the future. And sort of a neutral site belonging to the Jebusites, so David's able to make a new capital right in the middle of the country. And it'll be, of course, where Mount Zion is at, the headquarters of God's kingdom here on earth, as far as David's reign, and where the temple's going to be built. David acquires that property. Then you have the covenant that's made with David in his house. This applies to the distant future. Through him is going to come the Christ. His kingdom is going to be an everlasting kingdom. It'll never be passed on to any other tribe of Israel or whatever. It's going to belong to David's family. Of course, Jesus Christ came from David's family. He is the king forever. Until the second covenant, he's going to be reigning, and he turns the kingdom back to God. So all that is prophesied and foretold. And then it teaches us important spiritual truths about depending upon God, the kind of trouble David gets into when he doesn't do that, and the problems that arise in his family. But we have sin, and it's working, and it's punishment, and it's pardon that you see in the life of David. You might kind of sum up the book in a key passage is 2 Samuel 5, 4 and 5. David was 30 years old when he became king. He reigned 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. So that's what this book is about. He is a man after God's own heart that becomes king. 70 years old when he died. He served his own generation, Paul said, and he did the will of God. So he has a lot of imperfections and mistakes, but he always comes back to God and repents. He's a shining light for God. He is a man of action. He's a poet. He's a lover. He's generous in his victories. He's stern in his justice. He's a loyal friend. There are many great qualities of David to look up to. But he's not perfect. His sins are recorded in God's Word. It's not like other ancient books that only tell you the good stuff. God's book tells you the truth. It tells you the flaws of these men, like all of us have, except for Christ. And he's honest, he's contrite enough to acknowledge his sins and truly repent, unlike Saul did. He comes back to God, and he gets forgiveness as he seeks it and obtains it. Here's sort of a chronology of his life. And again, in David's life, there's a lot of things you can't nail down. So a lot of this is kind of guesswork, but at least this particular author that I was looking at has him anointed as king about the age of 11. Maybe came to play the harp for Saul in his court at 12. Fought Goliath at 19. Was in Saul's army at 20 and general eventually. Fought for Saul, or had to flee from Saul at 24, after he married the king's son and daughter-in-law. Then he's with Achash there by 28, after getting done all that time hiding in Judah, and then by 30 he becomes king. He anointed over Israel and all of Israel at 37. The sin with Bathsheba is hard to fix exactly when that happened. I've seen 57 there. I think 47 makes more sense. You have to remember there's got to be time after that for Solomon to be born to be the next king, right? And he comes from Bathsheba. So trying to figure out exactly that part. And then the rebellion by Absalom when he was 61, and his death when he was 70. So I'll have to come back to that next time.
You now. Carolyn's parents, her mother will be flying in Friday to Dallas and driving up here, and then Dad will be a week right from that. He'll be flying in here. So that's when him and her, they're traveling. And Carol Barnes, I suppose, has 3 compression fractures. And they said they're in the middle of the back, and that's where your breathing comes through. So she's had a very tough time when you get close to the breath there, and says she's sleeping. The imitation song is 386. Yeah. Mark. And 24 wings are the Lord's, but he can then understand his own way. 21 way of a man is right. the Lord the heart is kind of why do we do what we do? And well, brothers, North Carolina, Texas, thing I told him, look at verse 14 or 16 to 25. So there's a way that a man the end thereof death. Don't say the same thing. God thinks that's rest. I got to think about raising a kid since there's so many here, new ones. I remember a long time ago when and yeah, I never had one. I was almost 30. And I know and a lot, you know, I'm gonna correct parents. What if you're raised at a child? I knew her all around somewhat like me, and her child was adamant and in there calmly, but I don't know if you've ever seen ladies have barrel horses. Right before they take off, that horse is jumping and kicking out. It's ready to go. I was inside, I was, the Tasmanian devil was spitting. And she looked at me and somehow, I don't know if I had said something, she said, well, we just don't believe it's making each other. I said, yeah, I can see that. And of course, there is my understanding that was going on, and my reputation of having a finesse of a hand grenade just grew. So how you think of how do I raise my kid, and you think, well, my parents didn't do it right. But if you look at where you are on Sunday morning and where you are tonight, somebody did something wrong because you're in the Word, you're studying, and but it all goes back to, I think this is the right way, and that's how we make our decisions. And I only got 4 or 5 verses out of here, and there's many more. In 5:21 says, "For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and He ponders all His goings." He looks at everything we do, and He watches everywhere we go. And in 16 and 32, the first part of this is on anger. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And the last part is what really, to me, is very important. And he that ruleth his spirit, and he that taketh the city. I don't know how your battle is, but I battled it myself in hospital. I was on the phone with a lawyer in Texas over a closing on my mother's house. And he's a member of the church, and I was dealing with his secretary, and told me that they could not file the papers when they closed the house, and I was going to have to. And I was getting upset. spent a lot of money to get this done, and of course, here I am with my CD in the truck again. And it starts with Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Thessalonians. And as I was getting a little intense and aggravated over what this guy that's a member of the church would do and not perform like he ought to, here it came. Put off wrath and malice. And it came at the right time. It came at the right time for me to finally stop and think the way I think things ought to be. I should. So he that ruleth his spirit is better than he that thinketh. In 20 to 24, which I read again, man is going to the Lord, how can a man then understand his own way? Verse 3, 5, 6, and 7. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all the ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. Be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It gives us a way to figure some things out. It's hard because you think that you know what to do. Because of your past experience. And the only thing I can come up with is in verse 3 of 16. It says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. So our life is committed to God Almighty, and we do, as Paul said, think on these things, what's true and honest, just, holy, and pure, that our thoughts can be established. Our invitation is 386. Let's stand at this time.
Troublesome times.